Hey guys, so for my presentation, I got to dive into Batman the Killing Joke, which was penned by Alan Moore. You might know him as the guy who wrote Watchmen, and it was illustrated by Brian Boland. I've included a shot of the cover here for you. That's actually from the deluxe edition, which I read, which I actually got from the UNK library. Um, the cover here is very interesting because it's actually a reminder of one of the most disturbing parts of the comic. I mean, there are several, but this one obviously wins that title. I'll get to it in a second. Um, and a fun fact for you, this photo is actually based on the illustrator himself. He is posing with the camera to get the lines right as to how the Joker's posed, so I thought that was pretty cool. Also, while I was reading the comic and starting out this presentation, I thought, a really good subtitle for this could be Jim and Barbara Gordon's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. Just saying. Anyway, let's dive on in. Alright, so I have just a few definitions to clarify for you. First off, we all know about the superhero genre. It's been crushing box offices lately. Anybody ever heard of this small movie called Avengers Infinity War? Yeah, that kind of thing. But so just think about your typical machismo fueled men in tights battling megalomaniacs. Your typical good versus evil with superpowers. In this specific case, a super wallet and some bad days of life experience. Okay, so one-shot comics, pretty self-explanatory. Normally they don't fit into the overall continuity of a character's story as they're just a one-time deal, hence the name one-shot. This one, however, in particular, is very interesting. Even though it is a one-shot, a lot of its content is considered definitive and has been and is still being used in Batman and Batgirl comics today. It has left a remarkable impression on the Caped Crusaders narrative, especially because of Batgirl's severed spine, but we'll get to that. Canon refers to a list of stories, in this case of pop culture relative to Batman. It usually refers to what the legitimate producers of the original content have made, not byproducts such as spin-offs and fan-made things. You've probably heard professors talk about the Western literary canon. Instead of thinking about a bunch of white dead guys, think of it as a bunch of white guys wearing capes and spandex and fighting maniacs with purple suits and green hair. Finally, I just wanted to mention the Eisner Awards, as this comic actually won this honor. So TV shows have the Emmys, movies have the Oscar Academy Awards, while comics have the Eisners. They are that important. So a little bit on the genre and the style of The Killing Joke. It is a Batman and Joker title, so of course it falls into the superhero villain genre. Uh, Boland's artwork is carefully created. The colors are fairly muted until he wants the reader to really focus on something. I'll explain this in the next slide with some panel samples from the actual comic itself. Also, this one shot conveys the Joker's origin, so to make those panels come across clearly, they are washed out entirely except for a gradual increase of red in certain objects. The red actually leads up to a pivotal part in the comic if you actually decide to pick up The Killing Joke and read it, which I recommend. There are some problems, like a lot of very thematically bad things, but overall, for a superhero story, I strongly recommend it. Anyway, you'll see that everything in the flashbacks is pretty much black and white except for these slight tinges of orange and red. Those gradually get more and more intense because they're leading to a pivotal moment in the Joker's story, when he actually becomes the Joker. Of course, this is just one possibility of the Clown Prince of Crime's origin. That's a hard epithet to say. I apologize. Uh, as we're being told the story through his memories, they are not always the most reliable because he willingly chooses not to remember things correctly. He's trying to just succumb to complete madness here. Uh, One of the Joker's big characteristic traits is madness. Well, he tries not to remember things correctly. As he says, he prefers his past to be multiple choice. I'll get to that a little bit more with one of my articles. But anyway, as I briefly mentioned, this is a thematically gritty and explicit work, one that has come under immense scrutiny from comic fans and scholars since it was first released in 1988. So I provide an example of the black and white part of the graphic novel. This is actually the piece on the left, and it is This particular piece right here is the first scene in the backstory of the man who later becomes the Joker. As you can see, there's really no color except for those little tinges of orange that later become a vibrant red. This is actually reminiscent of the Red Hood, which is a big part of the Joker's origin. Um, I actually have a quote from the intro of the novel that I'll read to you here. Uh, Boland washes out all color in each one of these panels, but he chooses to spotlight an object in each, a bowl of tentacles, shrimp, and so on, in increasingly intense shades of red, all leading up to here's that sense that everything has been planned from the start by masterful hands. The Red Hood that was posited to be the Joker's mostly forgotten origin way back in 1951, and the transformation of the milquetoast failed comedian to insane criminal mastermind. So, that's the black and white parts. The other panels here offer an example of what I mean by the muted, washed out colors. The back panels, not the one of the Joker, but of the Bat and the Rain, that hardly have any color. These add to the really gritty and dark nature of this comic. But we'll come back to that in a bit because this comic actually wasn't like that when it was originally made. The photo of the Joker in front, which is highlighted in green so it sticks out a little bit more, shows what the more vibrant colors can do when you're focusing on one particular piece. As this is the first appearance of the real Joker, because in the beginning, Batman actually wants to go talk to the Joker to see it's like, we're going to end up killing each other in the end, aren't we? That's just what we're destined to do, that kind of thing. Well, the real Joker's escaped, and he's left someone who's just covered in white makeup and has green hair in his place. So this is the first time in the comic that we actually get to see the real Joker. So he is highlighted a lot more. He actually is brighter. He's larger than the panels, so larger than life, so to speak, to get a better focus from the readers. So a little bit on the history. This comic was first released in March of 1988 by DC Comics. Boland wanted to work with Moore to create a Joker origin. He actually sought out Moore for this particular project. The stories continued to impact Joker's narrative as countless writers and artists used the Killing Joke as part of the Batman canon. Um, it's not just the Joker, by the way. Barbara Gordon, who is Batgirl, she plays a very small role in this, just to be Joker's victim, basically, to get a rise out of Jim Gordon. One of my articles actually talks about this a bit more, but basically, she ends up getting shot and her spine gets injured, and she is basically stuck in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. She actually becomes DC's first disabled superhero in the form of Oracle, but there are other problems inherent in this that I'll get to in a second. But even though it was a one shot, it has made a lot of impact on the Batman canon since 1988. Anyway, since its release, the comic has been remade into a deluxe edition with the colors completely revamped into the style I've described previously. I actually read the deluxe edition, so on the next slide I provided a side-by-side comparison of the 88 versus '08 panels. There are some big differences in coloration that I'd like to show you guys. Uh, but besides this deluxe edition, it was recently made into an R-rated animated film of the same name in 2016. The film got some pretty bad reviews, I know, probably just because of the source content, but they actually added some more problematic stuff just to create story. Uh, but another fun thing about it that I think is cool because I like Mark Hamill, he reprises his voice acting role as the Clown Prince of Crime. So here you can clearly see the coloration differences in the 88 and '08 versions. See how the 1988, which is on the left, has a less serious feel to it because it's almost neon and almost too cartoony in nature, and for such a serious comic that um, is super violent, it really doesn't fit the tone. Uh, Compared to 2008, it feels a lot less like a Batman and Joker story. I don't, when I look at that, it doesn't feel Batman-esque to me. It's not dark and brooding enough to be Batman. But when you look at the ones on the right, it fits. I really think it does. Boland actually hated the colors in the original, so he asked to redo them in the deluxe edition. The story, since the Killing Joke inherently is all about the darkness of the inner machinations of the Joker's mind and his complete insanity and the likenesses between Batman and the Joker. Uh, this definitely fits. Notice also that only the colors have changed. The line art is exactly the same. So reviews for this comic are mixed in contemporary society. There's a lot of feminist debate about it. There's a lot of actual debate about its place in the Batman canon and continuity. But when it first debuted, it was a major success. It won an Eisner Award for the Best Graphic Album in 1989, which is a huge honor. It has been hailed as the definitive Joker story and the greatest Batman story ever told. Tim Burton admitted that The Killing Joke was a primary influence for his 1989 Batman movie, and Heath Ledger used it as a reference for The Dark Knight in 2008, like one of the best superhero movies ever made. Um, However, writer Alan Moore has since disowned the comic. So I found three trends in academic work and reviews for this. A lot of them had to deal with the continuity of the Batman canon. Sanity, insanity, and psychology was the other big one because obviously Joker's a maniac, and how does that relate to Batman and all of this stuff? And of course, feminism. So the three articles that I picked, I actually have a slide on each that I'm going to discuss, and I have some textual panel examples to explain. But the past is multiple choice, textual anarchy, and the problems of continuity in Batman: The Killing Joke actually talks about a few different forms of continuity. It was a pretty fascinating article with a lot of really in-depth analysis about the panels themselves. Um, Two Lunatics, Sanity and Insanity in The Killing Joke. It actually discusses the mirroring of Batman and the Joker. There are a lot of likenesses. People might think that they are so different, but they're actually more similar than they are different, which I cannot wait to talk about. And then, of course, Oracle of the Invisible Rape and the Killing Joke is another good article about some very not so good subject material. But yeah, let's start with Mittenen's first article. So the first major article was about continuity, actually textual anarchy, because the author of this actually argues that The Killing Joke is a layered text that simultaneously is ordered yet denies order in the Bat and Joker continuity. This has a lot to do with it being a one-shot, yet it still continues a lot um, within the canon of the Batman. But continuity is always an issue in superhero comics. You go through so many artists and writers who deal with the same characters. They always give them different treatments. And there's pretty much an infinite amount of narratives in superhero media. These basically never end. It's like Superman, he can never marry Lois Lane. Batman can never kill the Joker. There are countless examples like that in this genre, and it's fascinating. But regarding that textual anarchy, so the Joker mentions that he prefers his past to be multiple choice. Um, it gets very metatextual about comics themselves because of those multiple narratives. There's never just going to be one origin story for the Joker. Multiple artists can bring in their own ideas. They haven't really, but when it comes to other parts of the story, you can pretty much do anything with super heroic and villainous characters. So yeah, like I said, if you want Batman to stay Batman with the Joker, you can never kill or rehabilitate this man. Permanent. It would make a permanent change. Therefore, you'd be ending the serial continuity of Batman, and that would just take out a lot of fun, really. Okay, so the second article, Two Lunatics, is actually on the sanity and insanity of both the Joker and Batman. It talks about whether or not Joker actually is able to forego reason entirely and just completely delve into absolute madness. Um, he seems absolutely senseless as a villain, but he tries to destroy order with order. Even if it is the most distorted form of reason, it is still there. Um, so he can't completely escape it, no matter how much he wants to. Meanwhile, Batman actually has this watered down sense of logic and justice. And both of these characters think on like a similar chaotic wavelength. They are more alike than they are different. So these are the panels that I chose to show how both of these characters are on like the same wavelength, even though they don't really want to admit it to each other. This is just after Batman has shown up again and is like, we're gonna end up killing each other and all this kind of stuff, and he's done thinking about it and he just wants to talk to the Joker. He doesn't actually want to kill him or anything. But the Joker decides, hey, I'm gonna tell a joke, hence the killing joke. But funnily enough, both Joker and Batman end up laughing at this joke, showing that they are on that same pretty messed up wavelength together. So they're always going to be there as a strange duo. So besides continuity and insanity, the other big thing that I read about was feminism. Within Oracle of the Invisible, Maverick actually talks about Barbara Gordon's appearance, sparking serious controversy for this book. She's there really for nothing more than a few panels, and within it, she gets completely brutalized. She's there for nothing more than a plot device for the Joker to pose and play with, just to get an emotional response from her father, Commissioner Jim Gordon. So yeah, I'm not gonna include the panels, because I already have quite a few panels, and this presentation is getting a little long. But she's shot as soon as she answers the door when the Joker comes calling. She falls back against a glass coffee table. The Joker undresses her and takes lewd photos to use against Jim in later scenes, and it's hinted that the Joker may have raped her mangled body. So, two things. Moore, the writer, he asked if he could drastically harm this character, saying that he needed to. And this is also a textbook case of fridging. If you've heard of the women in refrigerator syndrome that Gail Simone came up with, uh, after I believe it was Green Lantern issue 54, um, when the current Green Lantern actually comes home and finds his girlfriend chopped up and stuffed in his refrigerator, hence the term women in refrigerators. But Barbara Gordon is a textbook case for it because she is literally just almost decimated as soon as the Joker comes in, and it's only to affect her father. Like, we don't even get to hear any of her reaction to it, it's just all about him. So stepping away from criticism, a little bit on the demographic. DC Comics are read primarily by males. Article I read actually said 93% of their target demographic are males. Most of their readers are actually 25 to 34 years old. There are some really explicit themes like rape, psychological and physical torture, and mutilation, so it should be read by a more mature audience, most likely 15 and up, according to Common Sense Media. But I know a lot of people don't take these ratings to heart. Personally, as a kid, I didn't really take them to heart, so I can't really give you an exact demographic on this. So, like a lot of society, I'm really split on this comic. Like, I mean, there's some really good stuff in here with it being a Batman story. It paints the Joker and Batman as mirrors of each other. As the Joker notes, it only takes one bad day for someone to become like him. Sure, he fell into chemical runoff kind of thing, and his skin turned white and his hair turned green, and he had absolutely no choice in that matter. But Batman does have a choice in his persona, but clearly something traumatic had to happen to him for in order for him to decide one day it's like, hey, I'm gonna dress up as a bat and fight crime. They are clearly similar to each other. But having one bad day for somebody to just completely lose it, that could happen to anybody. Although we hope not to turn into a complete maniac like the Joker. So yeah, it's a good Batman story, but I have serious issues with Barbara's brutalization. She's yet another woman in superhero media that gets a mere plot device, just in a few panels, tortured and allegedly raped, only to get an emotional reaction from a man, in this case her father. She gets paralyzed, and the requirement to live her life in a wheelchair becomes part of DC Comics for decades following when she becomes Oracle. Uh, my big thought after those scenes is, why do female characters always have to get treated this way? Mean, yeah, it happens to some male characters, but if you go to the Women in Refrigerators website, I actually have for prior projects, the list goes on, and it is honestly ridiculous. So this last slide is optional, but it's a little bit of fun. I included the ending of the animated film in case you don't want to watch the whole thing and you just want to see the ending. It is panel for panel practically the same as the source content. And this actually gives you a different method to experience the mirroring effect yet again. They're posed right across from each other, they're quite alike. Um, and the ending leaves things unresolved, as superhero media commonly does. So, but it does note that the Bat may have killed the Joker, or did he?